I'm Thanasis Bakolas, the Senior Advisor to the Greek Prime Minister for EU and US Affairs. And this is a conversation about Europe. Welcome from Athens to my friends, Rahman of Eurasia Group in London, and Ferdinando Giugliano, Advisor to Prime Minister Draghi from Rome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Thanasis.
How are you?
Very well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, next year we'll do it live in Delphi, I hope.
Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. So, Mij,
I've got a number of questions, and it's a pleasure to be with the two of you. I thought we've got 35 minutes, so we will spend that 35 minutes talking about the future of Europe. To kick off, Thanasis, perhaps a question for you, and then to Ferdinando. What's your assessment of how Europe has handled the health pandemic?
well, I think even the staunchest Eurosceptic will have to say that the European Union as an institution has done exceptionally well. And I'm talking about two things, of course, the vaccines, the procurement of the vaccines for all member states and all citizens of the EU, and of course the recovery plan. Now, the vaccines. I think that if we look at what happened in the beginning of the pandemic with PPE, where every member state was on its own looking to procure masks and other hospital requirements, and compare that to what the Commission did with the vaccines, I think it's a humongous success, and we got to give the Commission a lot of credit for that. And the second thing being, of course, the recovery plan. I mean, let's remember that 2 years ago, nobody would have imagined or expected that the European Union as an institution would borrow as one entity for the benefit of member states and their citizens. So if you look at it from that perspective, vaccinations and recovery plan, I think the EU has done exceptionally well.
Ferdinando?
I share the assessment on economic policy. I think our view on vaccines is a little bit more mixed. I'll explain why. I mean, on economic policy, I completely second what's been said on the recovery fund. Of course, now the big challenge is the implementation. It's something which here in Italy we are extremely focused on. We've rewritten sections of the plan under this government, especially on reforms, which are now a very substantial part of Italy's recovery plan. But I would also like to mention a couple of other innovations. The SURE program, which, as Prime Minister Draghi said, we would like to keep in place after the crisis. We think it's been a very successful innovation, both economically and politically. And at the same time, and also I think the fiscal policy response more generally, the fact that all countries have been keeping very expansive fiscal policy throughout the crisis, learning from the mistakes of the past. And again, it's something which Prime Minister Draghi said he would like to be kept in place for some more time, because the economic crisis is not over, and it's certainly you could also almost argue it hasn't yet started in some sections, because we have all these measures like job retention scheme, loan moratoria, which have frozen parts of the economy, and which we don't know what are hiding in a way behind. On vaccines, I second what's been said on joint procurement. I think it's been a great, a very important strategy, because it's avoided a war between various member states, which would have been damaging. But there's been a delay in, in the rollout. We believe part of the problem has been some pharmaceutical companies. I think you all know which one I'm referring to. But Prime Minister Draghi, since coming, has been trying to inject a little bit of urgency into the approach which the EU should take with these companies. We're not talking about all companies, but there have been delays. Contract enforcement has been an issue. Now, we know it's a complex matter, and we need, one needs to know exactly what's happened. But the result has been a delay, and that's been unfortunate, because now that the rollout is going at good speed, we're all seeing how successful it's been. Of course, there have been some domestic issues as well with the way certain governments have handled the rollout, so I'm not just blaming the EU here. But I think, a little bit of thinking over what went wrong over procurement, if anything went wrong, I think it's something which we want to keep in mind also for future reference.
If I may, I think we have to measure this in two very distinct ways. If we are to evaluate the performance of the European Union as an institution. The first is what I initially spoke about, where we were and where we reached. And I think looking at from that perspective, the achievement of the European Union has been quite amazing. On the other hand, if you look at it from a more technocratic aspect, and you'll see that missteps have existed, and problems have existed. But here is the key: how fast, how efficiently, how smart has the reaction been by the institutions. One could argue that at times the reactions was slow, but ultimately we see a ship that is by definition very, very difficult to turn. The ship of the 27 member states and the institutional entities that frame it, turning with a better dexterity and a little bit more decisiveness. So that's a good signal for the future of the European Union, if we keep it up, of course, and if we make all the hard decisions that are required in order to move forward in a more decisive and in a more effective manner for our citizens.
If I could, so I want to talk about both the recovery fund as well as fiscal policy in a bit more detail in a second. If I could first ask both of you, in the very short term, again, specifically related to COVID, what the short-term challenges or the risks are that you both see, respectively, in Greece and Italy, as your leaders both attempt to chart this course around opening up. And I'd ask you to try and be concise in your answers, because there's a lot we want to get through. So Ferdinando, perhaps I could come to you first. As Mario Draghi seeks to reopen, what are the biggest concerns that you have as he tries to cut path forward?
Well, we want this reopening to be permanent, so we are adopting a gradual approach. We've taken some, important steps at the beginning of April, at the end of April. If you come to Italy, you can go to a restaurant, both lunch and dinner, so long as it's outdoor. And that was before the science-based measure of reopening, which, and the reopening is going quite well. Together with the ramp up in the vaccination, we're seeing a decline in both infections, but especially pressure on hospitals, a number of people in intensive care, and that's because we are securing a better coverage of vaccination, especially for elderly and fragile. As we go forward, I mean, obviously, we want to make sure that, you know, the vaccine, you know, there is something which is independent from us, which is are vaccine as effective as they seem to be elsewhere? I mean, I see no reason why they shouldn't be. So I'm optimistic from that point of view. Of course, variants are an issue, and we are doing all we can to ensure that, you know, countries, for example, India, where some particularly dangerous variants seem to be in place, traffic from India is managed at the moment. But I think mainly at the moment it's a matter of confidence, and you know, the population here in Italy is rightly frustrated and tired after almost a year and a half of restriction. Some businesses have had a very difficult year and a half. We've tried to do all we could to support them, but of course we need to keep supporting them, because from an economic point of view, this is not over. We'll see a rebound, but it's going to be asymmetric. There are going to be sectors of the economy which will struggle, and once our support measures are withdrawn, and I'm talking about the temporary support measures like moratoria or job retention schemes, we'll see some of the real damages of this pandemic, economic damages, I mean.
Thanasis?
Well, it's going to be hard. There's no question about it. We still haven't seen the brunt of the economic consequences. But here in Greece, businesses have been supported greatly by the government. We haven't seen an increase in unemployment. Businesses have furloughed workers, and the government have supported them in their efforts. And as Giugliano said, the same thing we see here in Greece. People are tired. They're eager to open up again. Of course, that's what the government here in Athens is trying to do. I think epidemiologically, we are in good shape after a third wave that was difficult. But our vaccination program is proceeding exceptionally well. Tourism is opening on the 15th very carefully. And we're looking forward to a good summer, better than last year. It's going to be a struggle. There's no question about it. And in the short term, governments all around Europe, including in Greece and in Italy, are going to be called upon to continue helping businesses stay alive. We've done it with very good success here in Greece. We're very happy with the support extended to businesses. And we're looking towards the future with, we're very positive.
So both of your governments deserve big congratulations for the recovery plans that have been submitted to Brussels. I think they set the benchmark, frankly, for other EU member states. They've been well received and well praised. I'd like to talk a little bit about the medium-term implementation challenges. I think there's little risk to disbursements this year, but as you both look out over the medium term into next year, could you perhaps articulate what you believe to be the main challenges regarding implementation that your respective governments will face? Perhaps Thanasis, will start with you.
Well, we're in a little bit better place than most countries because we have been through the process of getting our programs through European institutions, and this is, I guess, the benefit that we've had from the era of the crisis and the memorandums. And I think that pretty much explains why Greece 2.0, our plan for using the recovery fund, has been hailed by the European Commission. It's a great plan, not only because it is 4,004 pages that you know, really get into detail, but you know, we know what needs to be done. I mean, every government knows what the investment priorities that the country requires. So we were able to put together a very good plan. As I said, 4,000 plus pages, including 1,000 plus pages from an independent auditor verifying our numbers. So I think Greece is ahead of the game when it comes to the recovery plan. This means a lot to Athens. It means a lot to Greece. We're talking about 32 billion in grants and loans over the immediate period. 72
Thanasis,
billion euros.
If I could push you, Thanasis, on the implementation challenges, what do you believe those to be over the medium term?
Well, I think we have an excellent program presented, which means that in terms of talking to Brussels about getting the program approved, we're going to be in much better shape than other countries, which will allow us to begin implementation probably faster than most countries, you know, and start putting the money to use. As I said, we know what we need to do, and we have a very clear idea of how to do it. But of course, it's a challenge. There's no question about it. And this is the most important challenge, I think, of the post-pandemic period, because 72 billion euros over the next 7-year period can effectively change the economic landscape of this country, and we're not going to let this opportunity go by. This will define ultimately our government, and we're looking forward to this challenge.
Ferdinando?
Look, I mean, I see two kinds of challenges. One is on investment. We are planning a radical transformation, you know, especially in the field of digitalization and environmental transition. And a lot of this money will have to be managed from various segments of the state, local government, central government. And, you know, I mean, I think we need to be frank. Italy in the past has not always been great at spending European money. So that was one of the first things we looked at when we rewrote the recovery plan in this new government, setting up a governance structure which would ensure that the money is spent wisely. And that's why we've beefed up essentially the Ministry of Finance. We've given it, you know, all the powers to monitor the implementation of the program. And we have a number of checks and balances in place to ensure that local authorities are supported if they need to spend this money. So spending this money quickly, effectively is a challenge, but I think it's also an opportunity because it's allowing Italy to rethink and restructure its public administration, which, as we know, can be excellent in places, but can also have problems in others. The second challenge is over reforms. Now, that's, I think, the most extensively rewritten part of the plan compared to what had been thought from the previous government. It's been rewritten, you know, I think, really great speed and with great ambition. But now, you know, Parliament needs to support it. I mean, it's already supported because we had a vote in Parliament over the the plan, but now we'll need to go through the various measures on civil justice, on competition, on the public administration. And there has to be support, but I think it's very important because, as we know, our government is only going to be in place for the next 2 years at most, and this is a long-term project. So it's important that all political forces are on board. I mean, I'm optimistic. Why? Because we've managed to rewrite this plan and get it passed through Parliament in a very short period of time. There were doubts that we would be able to do it. There were doubts over whether we would garner political support and parliamentary support. And what we got was a resounding yes from Parliament, support from Parliament, with even significant, with even the main opposition party abstaining over it. So that suggests that there is broad support for this. There is a broad understanding that this, as Thanasis was saying, is a really unique opportunity for Italy and for Europe as a whole. And so, that makes me optimistic. But it's optimism because I've seen what's happened in the last 2 months. And I think it's something which reassures me.
Now, Ferdinando, you alluded to fiscal policy. In the European Commission's updated forecast yesterday, they point to output reaching 2019 levels at the end of next year, which suggests the debate over reapplication of the Stability and Growth Pact is for 2023, and that the framework will be suspended next year as well. Do you think there are meaningful risks on the fiscal side over that time frame? How do you see the debate on reform of the EU fiscal framework playing out next year?
Well, let me start from a consideration. I'll just briefly repeat myself. I think what the European Union has done in terms of fiscal policy is remarkable. We've seen both the joint effort, which we were talking about in terms of the recovery plan, but also individual countries had no qualms in using fiscal policy meaningfully and extensively. Also thanks to the the support from the European Central Bank, of course. But my point is, we've seen meaningful fiscal stimulus from all countries, and at the moment this is it's still going. And we think it's very important. Now, what are the challenges we see? The first challenge is keeping this fiscal support in place over the medium term. We shouldn't rush to the exit because, as I said, and as Prime Minister Draghi said, more authoritatively than I have, many bits of this crisis are not visible yet. We want to shift from income support to investment. We want to accompany the transition of the economy. We don't want to keep this frozen economy in place forever, but fiscal support has to be there also during the medium run. Now, as for the fiscal rules, I don't think the debate has started yet. The point we are making is that this is now a different world we are living in. This is a world where, because of the pandemic, public debts have increased everywhere. It's not just Italy, it's all countries which understandably and rightly have supported their economy by borrowing more. We need to have a set of fiscal rules which is compatible with this new reality, which allows better support of the economy during downturns, and also, that's my final point, we really want to rethink about the institutional structure of the euro area. Some of these mechanisms which we put in place for the pandemic, the Recovery Fund, the SURE Fund, I think have been great successes. They've been very welcome from outsiders. They've been very welcome from the bond market. They've been very welcome, above all, from our population. It's been broad support everywhere. So we really need, we understand the political complexities and difficulties of turning some of these instruments into more permanent features. And we are not expecting this decision to rush. But, if there were a political commitment to go further along this road, I think it would be exceptionally welcome, and it would be a great way to have a positive legacy from this terrible year and a half, which we've all gone through.
Thanasis, a question for you beyond Greece's borders. Europe is now moving through two very consequential transitions, both in Germany and in France. Merkel and Macron's partnership has been absolutely key in many ways to promoting and defending Greece's interests. If you think about Turkey and the Eastern Mediterranean, if you think about the agreement between the two on delivery of the recovery fund, how are you seeing the political transitions in both countries, and what opportunities and risks do you think they present to Greece and for Europe?
Well, countries are going to have elections, and elections are going to produce the results that they will. The question is, can the European Union as a whole move on? Despite the fact that in this case we have two upcoming processes in the biggest countries, leaders need to step up and when there's a void. And if you look at leaders like Prime Minister Mitsotakis and Prime Minister Draghi, who have taken ownership of a European agenda. I mean, they're not acting as southern countries that care only about themselves and are not interested in the whole. I think you're seeing a shift in the thinking, a shift in the prioritization, a shift in the leadership, and that's a good thing. Leaders are stepping up, but as Giugliano said, we need to look at the good stuff that the European Union has been able to achieve over this pandemic. I mean, mistakes have been made. There's a lot of problems that need to be addressed, but ultimately, if you look at the two big wins, I think we need to ask ourselves, how do we move forward? How do we address this never-ending quest for consensus in Brussels? These are questions that we cannot shy away from. Europe as a whole, there's no question about it, has pushed things under the rug in order to address them at some future time. If we want Europe to matter for our citizens, if we want as governments to make this connection and be able to have our citizens realize the input and the potential that the European Union has and can possibly benefit their lives, we need to work hard on that in the future and not be afraid to ask the difficult questions. Germany and France will go through their internal processes, but it doesn't mean that the European Union needs necessarily to be put on hold.
Ferdinando?
Look, I mean, I think that Germany and France will always be Germany and France, the first two countries, for population and in the European Union. We look forward to seeing how the process plays out. We've always had good relationships with these countries. We look forward to working with their whoever the leaders will be. In Germany will be a new leader. In France, it could be the same leader. We don't know. But at the same time, I mean, I think it's time to really engage in a, there are a number of leaders who care about Europe at this time. Prime Minister Mitsotakis, Prime Minister Sanchez, Prime Minister Costa, who just held a very important summit in Oporto just at the weekend. I think it's from this point of view, it's a very promising time for the EU, even though it comes at the times of deep and tragic crisis. Maybe that's the way Europe has been always meant to be. I mean, that's what I'm told. I'm very young to understand all of this properly, but maybe I'm understanding it now. But what we said, all of this has to be backed by political commitment. We need to start this process and actually not start, we need to proceed on this process of European integration. There have been some remarkable jumps over the last year and a half, 2 years, and we want to make sure that they are not lost as we move away towards the recovery. Because actually, not only they've been, my point is not only they've been welcomed from outsiders, but they've been welcomed from many of our own people. I mean, both in Italy, but also in other countries. There is, people understand what European solidarity is. People understand what joint European action is. And I think they seem to welcome it, which is something which all our leaders in Germany, France, Italy, Greece, Spain, wherever, need to, actually don't need to, because they understand it very, very well, I think.
I agree.
And I think
people understand.
And I'd say that's actually, from the two of you, a very nice thought to conclude on. I think we are in a new dynamic in Europe where a lot of the energy is coming from Mitsotakis, from Mario Draghi, from the South, a lot of the energy, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the innovations. So with that, I will conclude and thank both of you for your very informative remarks. I think they're at time. I hope that was interesting for our audience, and I look forward to joining you both again, I hope next year. That's progress.
Mish, thank you very much for this discussion. I think we need to leave it exactly there. There is potential here. We cannot write off what Europe can provide its citizens. We cannot, should not be cynical. I think just like the citizens here in Greece, citizens in Italy, and all around the world are eager to embrace this part of what defines us, because I'm Greek and European, I'm Italian and European, but that needs to mean something. It needs to get down to the everyday lives. It's not supposed to be about European funds that fix a bridge. It needs to be something bigger than that, and that's why the job that is being done by Mitsotakis here in Greece and Draghi in Italy is so important for the future of Europe.
Thank you, Thanasis. Thank you, Ferdinando.
I'd just like to thank everyone, and hopefully see you in Delphi next year. Live.
Absolutely. Thank you, Giugliano. Thank you very much. See you in Delphi next year. Mish, thank you.